Hey everybody, Mr. Grippa here, your simple anatomy teacher, coming at you from West Claremont High School, room 227. Today is the fifth and final video in the series on the cardiovascular system lecture material. Today we're going to talk about the conduction system and how the heart can go on doing its job without direct stimulus from your brain. All right, so this one won't be too long, so let's go ahead and get her started. All right, everybody, welcome to the fifth and final video in the series on the cardiovascular system. Today we're going to talk about the conduction system. This is how your heart maintains its rhythm and pace without any direct connection from the brain. The heart is controlled by the autonomic nervous system. Luckily, it is not under our conscious control. The autonomic neurons only increase or decrease the time it takes to complete a cardiac cycle or heartbeat. They do not initiate the contraction. The chamber walls of the heart can go on contracting and relaxing without any direct stimulus from the nervous system. And when we talk about this in kind of morbid detail, this is why there's two degrees of dead. There's brain dead, which is the brainwave activity is zero, but the heart, because of the conduction system, the heart is still beating. And with the help of a ventilator, a person's body, while brain dead, the body can be kept alive. Now, the diaphragm needs direct connection from the brain to breathe, but the heart will keep going. And so typically when someone is brain dead, the heart will continue to beat. The brain is not telling the diaphragm to breathe, and eventually the heart is just circulating blood that is not ever being reoxygenated by the lungs, and eventually the heart muscle being starved of oxygen, you have a heart attack. That individual has a heart attack. They go into cardiac arrest, and then they are dead. So the quote unquote legal definition of death is no heartbeat, and with no heartbeat, then that is what we would consider someone to be deceased at that point. They talk about, I watched again in morbid detail, I watched a documentary on the guillotine that was used in, the French Revolution, where they were decapitating a lot of the royals, the members of the monarchy in France. And they were talking about, how at that point they thought it was the most humane way to dispatch of someone's life. But in reality, maybe not so much, because they knew that the brain would continue to function until it ran out of oxygen-rich blood. And there's a story about a physician who was sentenced to die by the guillotine, and he told his assistant that he thought the brain would continue to function. So the only thing that he could do, that a severed head could do, would be to blink. So he told his assistant to count how many times he blinked after his head was severed from his body. And it was 18 times or 28 times or something. So the brain's still going to work until it runs out of oxygen-rich blood. So that means that individual can see his head fall into the basket, again, in morbid detail. So the heart will continue to beat without direct stimulation from the brain, until it also runs out of oxygenated blood, and then the heart muscle starved of oxygen. You go into cardiac arrest, and then the heart will stop beating, and that is definitely dead. All right, so enough of that talk. Let's get back to the conduction system. The conduction system is composed of specialized muscle tissue that generates and distributes the electrical impulse that stimulate the cardiac muscle fibers to contract. And the first place it goes is what is called the Sinoatrial Node, or the SA node, and it is deemed the pacemaker. So it will begin the cardiac cycle. The chambers have to beat in very synchronized rhythmic pattern, or they simply cannot efficiently pump blood. So when the atria contract, the ventricles have to be relaxed and open, or the blood has nowhere to go. When the ventricles contract, they need to be filled full of blood, and then the atria are usually also relaxed, but then there are valves that prevent the blood from flowing backwards. But the SA node, or sinoatrial node, is what sets the pace. These tissues are the sinoatrial node and the atrioventricular node, known as the AV node. The atrioventricular bundle, which goes down the middle, will go into what is called the bundle of His. I know it's spelled His, but it is pronounced His. It's the bundle of His. And that will fork into the bundle branches all the way down the middle of the heart through the intraventricular septum. And then that will branch out into smaller fibers that help conduct that wave of muscle stimulation called the Purkinje fibers. And it hopefully will be mapped out here shortly. Nodal cells have a characteristic known as self-excitability, or their ability to spontaneously and rhythmically generate action potentials. The normal resting rate of self-excitation of the sinoatrial node, or SA node, is about 75 beats a minute. So that's your average. On average, that is your resting heart rate. If you are in shape, it'll probably be less than that. If you're a runner, then you may be down in the 60s. You may be about 65 beats, 67 beats a minute, just because your muscles require less oxygen to do their job due to your running, and your heart just doesn't need to beat as often when you are at rest. The SA node, or pacemaker, is a compact mass of cells located in the right atrial wall, inferior to the opening of the superior vena cava. The SA node initiates each cardiac cycle and thereby sets the basic pace for the heart rate. And that's why it is known as the pacemaker. Once an action potential is initiated by the SA node, the impulse spreads out over both atria, causing them to contract simultaneously, and at the same time depolarizing the AV node, which is going to prepare that signal to be just slightly delayed as it heads down to the ventricles, and then allows them to contract just a fraction of a second behind the atria. The AV node, from the AV node, a tract of conducting fibers called the bundle of His run through the cardiac skeleton to the top of the interventricular septum, or the wall of tissue between the ventricles. It continues down both sides of the septum as the right and left bundle branches. The bundle of His distributes the action potential over the medial surface of the ventricles. Now there's another branch over on the left side that you got your anterior and your posterior bundle, that will fork off of the left bundle branch, and it helps time the muscle contraction of the ventricle so that it is very rhythmic and is in perfect synchronization with all of the other muscle contractions that are going on there in the heart. The actual contraction of the ventricles is stimulated by Purkinje fibers that emerge from the bundle branches and pass into the cells of the myocardium. And then at that point, the ventricles are going to contract at the same time. And hopefully we know by now that the right ventricle is going to push that blood up the pulmonary trunk on its way to the lungs for reoxygenation. And the left ventricle is going to push that oxygen-rich blood up into the aorta so that it can go anywhere in the body. Now, here is a link to a video where a fellow anatomy teacher goes into a little more detail about how this system works. I'm not going to play that video right now, but I will put the link below in the description on this video so that you can, after the conclusion of this video, you can go on, and if you need some further explanation, you can go check this out. All right, so be ready for that. All right, that's going to do it for not only lesson 5, but for all the lecture material on the cardiovascular system. If you have any questions, shoot me an email, and I'll do the best to answer them as fast as I can. If not, I'll see you guys in class. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you later.